This is House Planning Help episode 351. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build or retrofit. I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up in this session, my guest is Linda Farrow from Agile Homes, and we're going to be looking at how they're addressing some of the key challenges that face housing. So this is quite big picture, I suppose, today, but also including things that we love, really nice materials, straw and timber. They've got their panel system, prefabrication, looking at affordability, all the things that come up quite a lot. And I'll just explain the backstory here because they were a finalist at the ASBP, the Healthy Buildings Expo, a couple of years ago, and that piqued my interest. And then, as with all these things, we have a million different ideas going here, and sometimes we get distracted in another direction. And then when I was in Bristol, I was asking Josh, we did a podcast with him at the beginning of the year. What else is going on down here? What other interesting things? And amongst the interesting things, he said, go and check out Agile Homes because their new model for housing is really interesting. So that is what we're going to do today, covering topics like affordability, low carbon, modern methods of construction, performance. We never want to neglect that one. And I suppose today is also maybe more relevant if you're doing something on a bigger scale, perhaps a community build. So I started by asking Linda how this all came about.
So going way back, Agile has emerged as a result of a long-standing collaboration between myself and Craig White, my partner. So we're both business partners and life partners, and a range of people who we've worked with and learnt from along the way, really. So as we've gone on, we've progressively got to understand in depth the different parts of the system that you need to join together in order to deliver truly affordable homes. And, that's not the standard definition of affordable in the open market. It's what's truly affordable for normal people, maybe on a living wage. So we've progressively come to understand sustainable and low carbon design. So how do you make a building envelope both watertight and breathable and energy efficient? We've also then progressively worked through a lot of collaborative R&D, sometimes at European level, sometimes in the UK, where we've collaborated with practitioners and academics to really understand natural materials, how to combine them in ways that mean that you can then disassemble them afterwards. So very much thinking about applying circular economy principles and doing all the testing and certification that's needed to demonstrate that natural materials perform as well as, and in many cases better than, the materials that we in the UK have come to consider as conventional, i.e. predominantly brick and block and plasterboard. So that's the second strand. And then the third strand has been about how do you bring that understanding of low carbon, energy efficient design with understanding of the materials that you want to work with and their performance, and then combine that with building efficiently and quickly to address the very long program delivery dates that we tend to have in the UK when you're looking at using conventional materials. So working with bricks, you're very often affected by the weather, whereas if you're building your panels, your wall, floor and roof panels in a protected environment to standard dimensions and standard specs, then you can actually do all of that undercover, and then you bring your panels, in our case it's a panelised system, to site, and you can then have a very rapid assembly. So we've brought together those three dimensions really of know-how that with partners, collaborators, we've accumulated over the years.
Well, you've mentioned a lot there, and I think I'd like to focus in for a moment on the modern methods of construction, because as you say, we haven't been great at that in the UK. But I know how hard this challenge is. So where does it start? Did it start with the panel? Did it start with thinking about how can we bring this indoors into a factory? How has that side developed?
I think it comes from a frustration with the lack of performance in the UK housing sector from traditional house builders. And I don't mean to be unappreciative at all, because that doesn't get you anywhere. It's a hard problem to solve. So where does it come from? I mean, it comes from a desire to produce good quality design and performing solutions. So you're not compromising on quality or use of natural light or views out or trying to improve acoustic performance. It comes, I suppose, from a desire to understand the whole system, understand what the blockages and barriers have been, and to work progressively at removing all of those barriers over a long period of time.
Let's focus then. What are those barriers? Let's say it out loud.
Okay, these won't be necessarily in any order, but I think it starts from, particularly in England and Wales, less so in Scotland because there's much more timber frame in Scotland. But I think it starts from a concern of a fear almost, or a wariness around mainstream adoption of renewable materials, particularly timber and straw. Stories like The Three Little Pigs, they have a profound influence on us all, and we're worried about the strength and sustainability in the long term of the place that we call home. So there is a natural wariness, almost skepticism about using renewable materials culturally, I would say. So that's barrier number one. Barrier number two is the availability of land at an affordable price. And our model works to unlock land at low or no cost or for social value. So that immediately takes anything up to a third out of the cost of delivering affordable space. What are the other barriers? The other barriers are being able to prove to certifiers and therefore to insurers and mortgage lenders that your solution actually is as viable as brick and block. And so, for example, we worked hard and invested a lot of time and money in demonstrating that our panelised solution meets future homes standards and also meets the industry sector certification, BOPAS, which stands for Build Offsite Property Assurance Scheme. So we're certified, for example, to a 60-year design life, which is exactly the same as any conventionally built house by a major house builder. So those are three barriers. The fourth is finance, actually. Different client groups have different problems with access to finance. So for housing associations and local authorities, the barrier is how do they borrow, particularly with interest rates as they are at the moment, how do they borrow the money that's needed at an affordable rate for their business model? For individuals and community groups, it's the same problem. How do they access the capital that they need in order to build?
I think that those are common barriers that we can all relate to. Maybe I just want to ask a quick question. So insurance, fire risk, all of these sorts of things, do you almost have to go through this with each different lender, or is that what you do? Maybe just have one or two that like what you do and understand what you do?
Well, we're on a journey, Ben, so I wouldn't say we know the answer to that question fully yet. For example, we have a partnership with the Ecology Building Society now. I think we announced that about a year ago. So we are one of four pre-approved modern methods of construction providers. So we're pre-approved for an Ecology Building Society mortgage. The majority of the work that we're doing at the moment is actually with local authorities and housing associations and charities. So they have established relationships with lenders. So it's more about demonstrating the technical security and compliance of our solution. So that's where we really lean into our BOPAS certification and all of the other policies, health and safety compliance that we have to demonstrate as part of the pre-qualification questionnaire process to become an approved supplier.
Let's focus in on TAM then. Maybe first of all, can you explain what it is?
Well, so TAM stands originally for Transportable Accommodation Module. It's not a very snappy title, so we decided to shorten it to TAM. it just so happens that in terms of branding and positioning, we were also developing two other product lines at the time that also had three-letter names. So the name stuck. So in thinking about how to make a solution transportable and rapid to deliver, we also wanted to look at the legislative barriers and the planning barriers. So we came up with the idea to design a housing solution explicitly to comply with the Caravan Act, which specifies dimensions for a building that can be moved on the motorway network and can be delivered to site and become a whole building as a result of a single act of joining two elements together. So we designed TAM explicitly to comply with those requirements, which means one, that it can be moved. So it's then viewed as being a movable asset, which opens up other financing options, not just conventional mortgage lending for individuals, but it also opens up the potential to have the same kind of funding as you would have for a lease car, for example. We're not quite there yet, but one of our aims is to make it as easy for individuals and community-led organizations to buy into our system as if they were going to a car showroom, and they can sign the finance agreement and drive away in their car. So in the same vein, they could sign a finance agreement and have their TAM delivered to their site. So TAM is made of our analyzed modern methods of construction system. It arrives on site flat pack on the back of a flatbed lorry, like a very big IKEA build set. And once you've done the site preparation and localization, and you've decided what kind of foundations are needed for the ground conditions, the floor, wall, and roof panels go up in a day. So within a day, you're watertight. And then you can start on the internal fit out and the external cladding. So depending on the project, but typically you're looking at, once you've got that envelope up and watertight, you're looking at somewhere between a 10 and 14-week timescale to get your home fully kitted out and operational. And depending on the way the services work, it could be umbilical to an existing building, for example. So drawing on power, feeding into the drainage systems, drawing on water. In many cases, it doesn't need planning permission. Now, I have to be careful here because there are cases where it does, but for some clients to just make sure that they're really confident about the context and the compliance, we can procure for them a certificate of lawfulness from the local authority. But of course, we can also, in the normal way, obtain planning permission as well. So this isn't a way of in any way wanting to circumvent the law. It's about working with the law to find rapid, innovative, truly affordable solutions to what is a huge need in the UK and many other places.
What feasibility study are you doing beforehand to just gauge whether this is going to be appropriate for this site, or can you fairly much roll it out anywhere?
Okay. Before I answer that, I'm just going to contextualize things a bit more, Ben, because TAM and associated solutions are about 10% of what we do. So the other 90% is using our MMC panelised system, so exactly the same product, but using it in, I suppose, a more conventional way to design and deliver housing solutions that look and feel and like very conventional homes, but under the skin are operating in a very different way. So TAM, we find, can open up conversations with clients about more creative, imaginative solutions that then also can lead on to more conventional housing solutions that may or may not incorporate an element of TAM homes within the overall development. So I just want to contextualize that a little bit. So when we start looking at the client brief, and we've either helped them find a site or they've got their own site that they're bringing to us for appraisal, we'll obviously look at the planning context and see what requirements and conditions apply to that. We'll look at the natural environment and look at the features that we want to sustain and enhance. We'll look at trees in particular. We're very strong believers that trees, for the most part, should be integrated and incorporated in schemes rather than being seen as problems, as they often are by developers. And looking also at the ground conditions. So we have a range of specialist consultants that we work with in order to do feasibility for a scheme in much the same way that you would for any other opportunity.
So your 90% of the work that aren't the TAMs then, is this bespoke structures you're creating?
It depends what you mean by bespoke. We continue to use our panelised system, so walls, floor, and roof as the core of it. And the approach in terms of applying circular principles, regenerative principles, remains the same. It's just that we're looking more at what is the client brief here. I'll give an example. So we're on site just now in Bristol, Stonebridge Park, where we're delivering 7 homes for wheelchair users. And so we've taken our TAM design and using the panelised system, we've adapted that to a very difficult site, actually, a site that slopes very profoundly. So we're using stilts as part of the underpinning to get the levels. And so fundamentally, our panelised system, I would say, rather than TAM, is our core product. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. And I've also seen it in other applications, for example, up at Lilac, where they have a co-housing scheme. And is that another thing that this is quite suited to that community-led housing, and it's going to bring a lot of benefits because that's always what they're after, sustainable approaches?
Yes, definitely. I mean, another element of what we can introduce into projects is an element of community self-build. So we've explicitly designed the panel to basically use high-end power tools to assemble them. So we can manufacture, we can bring the materials and manufacture very close to the site. We've done it in empty farmers' barns, for example. We've done it in empty warehouse units. So we can use empty space and set up an agile factory where that's of interest to the client and the community. We can introduce an element of community self-build and skills development as part of what we do.
What does that mean for quality control then when you've got one of these pop-up agile factories?
So we have our BOPAS certification, Build Off-Site Property Assurance Scheme. And what we make sure is that we have a BOPAS compliant, competent team that supervises the manufacture. But we can find ways to build in local community contributions to that and still be compliant with the method statements that are required under BOPAS.
What are you interested in when these panels leave site? How are you checking them? Is it the density of the straw, or are there other tests going on?
We certainly apply quality checks to all of our supply chain, our timber suppliers, our straw suppliers, our wood fibre suppliers. Materials will arrive to any site or agile factory sealed as per the supplier's methodology. Then we look at moisture in particular. So where we're using straw, we use a particular kind of probe that looks at humidity within the chopped straw, for example. But I think if you want to get under the skin of the technical assessment and product quality in each case, I think I need to refer you to a colleague because I wouldn't want to mislead your listeners.
Fair enough. Why do you prefer this, I think I'm right in saying this, to be a turnkey solution?
I think in essence, it's about control and making sure that we can deliver the quality of product to the client. If you use a conventional procurement method where you've got the design and then you transfer over to a main contractor, the main contractor is incentivized to find all manner of ways to reduce their costs and increase their margin. And that's not a criticism, that's just the way the system is set up. We are a values-led organization. So, for example, we changed our articles of association to include a mission lock. that talks about us being really concerned to deliver genuinely affordable homes that are sustainable. And so everything that we do is guided by that key document, and our board scrutinizes everything that we do very carefully. So I think it is about aligning everything that we do with our core value of respect for people and planet. And so it's about control through the process to make sure that we can deliver to that time after time for our clients.
And where are we at with cost? We started this conversation saying we were looking for affordable solutions, but bringing things inside modern methods of construction sometimes comes with costs. I'm aware you've got your pop-up agile stations which may deal with that. So how are we looking compared to other ways of building?
That's a great question. We're removing land from the equation, particularly when we're working with local authorities and housing associations where they can leverage their own land holdings or arrange for transfer to communities at low or social value. I think we're on a journey in terms of cost. We're investor backed as an organization. We're having our fifth birthday this year. And our focus has been on growing and building a competent team that can scale for delivery. So we will be arriving at consistent break even by the end of this year, which is brilliant. And then our focus will be on how do we demonstrate genuinely affordable homes time after time. So I'm not dodging the issue here. The question of how do you build an organization from the ground up that is capable of delivering affordably time after time is quite a big question, and it's taken us some time. In terms of the costs that we're aiming for, so we are aiming to be able to deliver homes that our end users and clients can make available for local authority housing rates. So for a one bedroom home, for example, I think that will be £895 maximum that anyone can claim for a one bedroom home. So that's still quite a sizable amount of money, but it's a lot less than market rates. So we are designing our cost plans for each scheme with our clients to try and hit that benchmark every time.
Now, I'm aware you're taking on a massive project here and trying to do it all. So your ideal client then, who is it? Maybe it's not someone that listens here, but we do have a lot of community builders and so forth. So who, if I could just say, bring that person on now, who would you like to meet?
Someone whose values align with ours, so respect for people and planet. Someone who has access to substantial amounts of patient capital, who is like us, genuinely interested in providing as many people as possible with homes that are affordable in perpetuity. Because having an affordable home, a safe civil space to be in, is the foundation stone, in our view, for sustainable regenerative communities. And climate change is quite rapidly going to be a question of water and food crisis. So climate crisis is going to turn into a food and water crisis. So there are many, many immense challenges on the horizon for society. So we want someone who, like us, is very focused on helping society to put in place the foundation stone for us to then have the capacity to deal constructively with all the challenges that are yet to come.
And while we're on the topic of challenges, if we could help you with a challenge, what would that be? What is your biggest challenge?
I think it would have to be the patient capital, patient values aligned capital. The other big change would be government policy around fundamentals that is actually intergovernmental, and recognizing that governments have a duty in between terms and all, outside of party political allegiances to look after human beings and the planet, so that there are some policies that should be negotiated and agreed as being intergovernmental. That would be the other big challenge. I would say patient capital and intergovernmental policies that look at an intergenerational scale.
And finally, do you have any feedback from any of these completed schemes from users, from occupants? How do they find it?
The feedback is very positive. And I would also qualify that by saying that because of the nature of the relationships that we have with local authorities, housing associations, and charities, quite a lot of our end users, rather than our clients, are vulnerable. So we're working quite a lot with charities who care for severely autistic people, grown-ups or grown-ups with special needs. So it's actually quite a challenge for us to get end user feedback, if I can put it that way. But our client feedback, so the people who are paying us to deliver the homes rather than those who are necessarily ending up living in them, are very positive about the Agile experience. They really comment on the values, that the values just are embedded in everything that we do. And they comment on the quality of the space that we deliver and some of the unexpected properties. So, for example, when you build with renewable materials and are using things like chopped straw and wood fibre as insulation, you get a very calm building, acoustically calm. So we're finding that people are saying, well, these buildings are also really good for people with special needs or people who have mental health challenges. So yeah, we're very optimistic about the future. And we also recognize that as we grow, we're going to need to evidence our client and end user feedback in more quantitative ways rather than just qualitatively as we do it at the moment.
Linda, is there anything else you'd like to mention?
Yes, there's one other thing I'd like to mention. In looking systemically at this model, we are informed by things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So there are 4 or 5 of them that are especially relevant to what we do. So those inform our key performance indicators and the way we measure our performance as a business. We're also informed by different models, different ways of thinking about value and how we create value in society. So things like the 5 capitals model from Form for the Future, things like donut economics, things like small is beautiful, things like cradle to cradle, Michael Braungart and Bill McDonough. So those ways of thinking are the bedrock of the way we try and build our organization. So as part of that, we've been thinking a lot about how do we evidence and actually generate revenue from the carbon storage that we're achieving in our buildings and also in the social value that we're creating. So we've been doing work behind the scenes to build calculators and trial how we evidence carbon stored and social value generated. So we're just about to go live with what we call carbon and social value tokens that can potentially be traded. And so what that means is that we have found clients who are interested in buying separate to the homes, in actually buying and paying for the stored carbon and the generated social value as part of their ESG governance systems and processes. So rather than going and perhaps offsetting their carbon footprint by paying for X thousand trees in a plantation thousands of miles away, they're choosing to buy the carbon that we can evidence as being stored for a minimum 60-year design life in our buildings. And I think that's very exciting. And we have plans to use that methodology to generate revenue that can then further reduce the costs of some of our schemes for our most vulnerable clients. So we're really excited about that extension to the model and that rethinking of how do we generate value and revenue in a truly regenerative economy.
Well, it seems like there's some very good high level thinking, but also action on the ground. So I wish you every success in the future. Linda, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for such brilliant searching questions.
And you can reflect on this conversation in our show notes today at houseplanninghelp.com/351. We've got a summary for you there, some photos as well, so you can check out the Agile system and TAM. And if you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question, we would encourage that either on social media, we'll give the links, or at the bottom of the show notes, you need to scroll down. We'll link you, of course, to the Agile Homes website, houseplanninghelp.com/351. Let's have a quick Apple podcast review. This is from Ian in Epping. I broke ground on my retrofit and extension of our family's home 12 months ago. I wished I had found this podcast series before I planned my project, as it has been immensely helpful. House Planning Help has proven the more you know about building good homes and related fields, the more you realise you don't. For both building professionals and laymen like myself, the show is very accessible and informative. It's not too dry either, and the guests, who are either experts in their building fields or people who have gone through a new build or retrofit project, provide a wealth of experience and insight. We love these reviews because they help encourage new people to the podcast and tell new people what the podcast's all about. So if you can do that, however you're listening, whatever the app, I think Apple Podcasts is still the biggest, then that would be appreciated. And finally, a quick call for the Hub. This is the membership community that we run alongside House Planning Help. The idea being just to give you further assistance, often in a visual form, because we're a podcast here which is audio only. So it's our opportunity to follow complete projects. We do that in our in-depth video case studies. Take a whole year out to film these and to chop them up into 10-minute episodes so that you can watch entire builds and learn from all the decisions that are being made. We've got Ask the Expert, we've got our members only forum, the live training where we get guest experts on, our courses, the office hour where you can have a chat to me. Find out what it's all about. If you've never done it, you just listen to this bit, but you've never actually done it, please, houseplanninghelp.com/join. You might like it. Next time we're looking at neighbourhood retrofit. How can we help each other create better homes, more efficient, healthier? And Wookie seems to be a major player in Cambridge. So we'll find out what that's all about. Thanks for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.